In 1849, a British archaeologist named Austin Henry Layard pulled a cracked clay tablet out of the ruins of Nineveh, and the museum that received it locked it in a basement for over 170 years under a single classification, unclassifiable. In 2019, a junior researcher photographed that tablet without authorization and uploaded the images to a private academic forum. 48 hours later, 3 independent linguists had produced a partial translation, and what they found inside that clay was not a king list, not a creation myth, not a harvest record. It was a threat assessment. 12 entries, each one naming a race that knows Earth exists, each one ranked by what it has already done to us and what it still wants. Within a month, the research funding request was denied. The photographs vanished from every server that hosted them, and the tablet itself was quietly reclassified under a code number, buried in a database the public cannot search. The translations got out first, and somewhere inside that ranking sits one entry the scribes circled by hand directly into the wet clay, a single classification with no star, no constellation, no origin anywhere outside this planet at all. Join us, and let's discover the 12 races the Sumerians ranked by threat level, and the one they circled as the most dangerous of them all. Let's go.
Topic number 13. Pleiades Star Cluster. They watched multiple floods destroy human civilizations and never once intervened, and the tablet ranks that pattern of total non-interference as the lowest threat level of all 12 entries. The scribe ties this race to the cluster we now call the Pleiades, roughly 440 light-years away, describing beings who count the seasons of men, but do not touch them. That phrasing matters. Translators note the Sumerian verb used here appears nowhere else on the tablet, a term closer to bookkeeping than to visitation. These are not travelers passing through. They are a fixed presence, cataloging without ever stepping into the frame, across a time span that predates written history itself. Flood myths appear on nearly every continent, from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica, cultures separated by oceans with no possible contact between them, and the scribe treats that global overlap as evidence, not coincidence. Whatever this race recorded during those catastrophes, they kept it to themselves. No artifacts, no genetic trace, no interference in the outcome. To the scribe, silence itself was proof of safety. But the very next entry breaks that pattern completely, because the race ranked just above this one did not just watch humanity from a distance. It landed, walked the ground, and took a very specific interest in something no observer should have cared about at all.
Draco Constellation. They know where we keep our records. That single line, buried in the tablet's second entry, stopped 3 independent linguists cold when they cross-checked their translations in 2019, because everything else in this passage reads like a routine field survey. The scribe describes a race tied to the constellation Draco landing on Earth, collecting samples of plant life and animal life, then departing without a single attempt at contact. A standard collection expedition on the surface. Except the entry does not stop at biology. It specifies that if this race returns, the first thing they search for is what humanity has learned since the last visit. Not what has grown, not what has changed physically, but what we now know. That detail reframes the entire visit. A species interested in flora and fauna does not typically care about a planet's accumulated knowledge, its libraries, its stored data. This one does. The scribe gives no explanation for why, and no indication of how frequently these visits occur. What survives in the translation is only the unease of being cataloged twice, once as biology, once as intellect. And if a silent sampling mission left that kind of trace behind, the entry ranked directly above it describes something far stranger. A race that did not sample Earth at all. It was worshipped by it.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this.
Topic number 11. Apkallu. They were worshipped as gods for generations, and then they left without explanation, indifferent to the fact that entire civilizations had reorganized themselves around beings who never intended to stay. Researchers connected this entry to the Apkallu, sage-like figures described across earlier Mesopotamian sources as teachers who arrived, were elevated to divine status, and departed. The scribe uses one specific word for their exit, the same term found on unrelated administrative tablets to describe travelers passing through on their way to a more important destination. Earth, in this entry, functions as a waypoint, not a destination. What unsettled the translation team was not the departure itself, but the flatness of the language surrounding it. No gratitude recorded for whatever was taught, no acknowledgement of the worship received, just a procedural account: arrival, temporary godhood, exit. The scribe offers no motive, no timeline, and no indication of whether contact will resume. That emotional blankness stands in sharp contrast to every entry that follows it, because starting with the next position, the tablet stops describing beings who simply pass through and starts describing beings who track us with intent, counting something specific, for a reason the scribe clearly finds disturbing enough to record twice.
Topic number 10. Sumerian King List. The harvest comes when the field is full. That line closes the 9th entry, and no one translating this tablet has ever agreed on whether it is a metaphor or a countdown. The scribe describes a race that returns to Earth in cycles of roughly 6,000 years, a number researchers immediately connected to the bloated, near-mythological reign lengths recorded on the real Sumerian King List, a document listing pre-flood rulers who supposedly governed for tens of thousands of years each. During every visit, this race makes no contact and no interference. It counts: human population, number of cities, rate of growth. The scribe states directly that they count in order to determine when to act, language that transforms a passive census into something closer to surveillance with a deadline. No number is given, no threshold is named. The tablet only confirms that a fixed point exists, that humanity is moving toward it with every generation, and that reaching it triggers something the scribe does not describe. If counting alone carries this much weight, the next entry removes any ambiguity entirely, because it does not describe a race that measures what already exists on Earth. It describes one that decided 10,000 years ago to plant something here first.
Topic number 9. Emmer wheat. Wheat carries a genetic anomaly no evolutionary botanist has ever fully explained, and the 8th entry on the tablet claims to know exactly why. The scribe states that this species did not evolve naturally on Earth in its cultivated form. It was planted here deliberately, roughly 10,000 years before the tablet itself was carved, by a race credited with introducing agriculture to early humans. That claim intersects with a real, unresolved gap in modern botany. Domesticated emmer wheat appears abruptly in the archaeological record, without a wild ancestor whose genome fully accounts for it, an anomaly specialists have argued over for decades without resolution. The scribe treats this not as legend, but as a documented transaction, recorded with the same flat precision used elsewhere on the tablet for population counts and territory. The entry closes with a promise that this race will return one day to see what has grown, using a Sumerian word that can mean crop or creation depending on context, a duplication several linguists argue was chosen deliberately. Grain or something else entirely. The tablet never clarifies. What it does make clear, in the entry immediately following, is that whatever this race gave humanity was never a gift without conditions, and the next visitor never needed to hand us anything at all to know precisely what we had built with it.
Topic number 8. Arecibo Observatory. The sound of weapons that tear the air without being thrown.
That phrase sits in the 7th entry, describing gunfire, a technology that would not exist for thousands of years after this tablet was buried. And the scribe had no framework to have invented it on his own. This race never came to Earth. According to the tablet, it never needed to. It listens, catching signals across distances the ancient world had no language to measure. Tuned to this planet since the moment Earth began producing anything worth hearing. Translators compared the description to modern listening infrastructure. Arrays built specifically to catch faint transmissions across impossible distances. Except in this entry, the listening has apparently run in reverse for millennia. The scribe lists exactly what reaches them: the sound of fire, the sound of metal cities rising, and finally, the weapons line that unsettled every researcher who worked this fragment. Whatever this race is, it already knows what humanity has built, down to the precise sound our violence makes. The entry ends stating plainly that they have not yet decided whether to respond. That single unresolved sentence marks a turning point in the tablet, because every entry ranked above this one no longer describes beings who merely watch or listen from a distance. It describes beings who already reached down and physically changed what we built with our own hands.
Topic number 7. Baalbek. 3 continents, 1 design, visible only from directly above, and the scribe treats that alignment as proof rather than coincidence. This is the point where the tablet's entire logic shifts. Every entry ranked below this one describes a race that watches, counts, or quietly gifts something from a distance. Starting here, the tablet describes races that physically altered human civilization and left behind proof engineered to be seen from a vantage point no ancient human could have reached, a scale of intervention nothing before it admits to. The scribe calls this race the Stone Builders, tied to the belt of Orion, and states they taught early humans to cut, transport, and assemble blocks heavier than any known technology of that era should have allowed. 3 specific locations are named: 1 in modern Egypt, 1 in modern Peru, 1 in modern Lebanon. Descriptions translators matched with unsettling precision to Giza, Sacsayhuaman, and Baalbek. Sites separated by oceans, yet sharing engineering logic no independent human culture should have arrived at 3 separate times by coincidence. The scribe adds one final detail that outweighs the construction itself. These structures were built to be visible from a great distance, from above, to something that was never standing on the ground. If a race capable of reshaping 3 continents worth of stone still only ranks 7th, the 6 entries above it had to justify a danger measured on a scale this tablet has not yet begun to describe.
Topic number 6. Fuente Magna Bowl. A stone bowl pulled from farmland near Lake Titicaca carries inscriptions that, according to several independent linguists, resemble Proto-Sumerian pictographic script, thousands of miles from where cuneiform was ever supposed to exist. And the tablet's 6th entry claims that distance meant nothing to the race responsible for it. The artifact, known today as the Fuente Magna Bowl, was uncovered in Bolivia's Chua region in 1958. Mainstream archaeologists remain split, some dismissing it as a modern forgery, others pointing to mineral wear patterns they argue are difficult to fake convincingly. The scribe does not resolve that debate. He states only that this race marked more than one location on Earth, cutting the same signature into stone across continents, so that whoever eventually found it would recognize a single hand behind every occurrence. The entry calls these markings a proof of reach, not a message meant to be understood, something built to be found rather than read. Its closing phrase has never translated cleanly, rendered only as, "The shape remembers who pressed it." Whatever that means, the scribe moves immediately from stone markings left on the outside of the world to something embedded far deeper, inside the population itself, carried in blood rather than carved in rock, and impossible to leave behind.
Topic number 5. Denisovan DNA. A fragment of the human genome does not trace back to any known human ancestor, and the 4th entry on the tablet claims to identify exactly where it came from. The scribe describes a race that destroyed its own world through its own actions, arrived on Earth as survivors, and integrated directly into the human population rather than settling apart from it. Researchers connected the passage to a documented genetic mystery: ancient Denisovan DNA identified from fragmentary fossils in a single Siberian cave, yet found today scattered across modern populations on multiple continents, a distribution science still cannot fully explain through known migration patterns alone. The entry's closing line has been translated several different ways, but the version most linguists accept reads, "The one who became us is the one who will end us." Embedded in that sentence is a warning the scribe never states outright. Whatever destroyed this race's original world now exists as a dormant trait inside a species that carries their inheritance without knowing it. No timeline is given, no trigger is named. What follows this entry does not describe anything hidden in blood or memory at all. It describes something that never needed to hide, because it never left Earth long enough to be forgotten.
Topic number 4. Mariana Trench. They never left. That single distinction separates the third entry from every race described before it on this tablet. The scribe states plainly that this race does not visit in cycles and depart. It resides, permanently, in facilities built into the deep ocean that humans, according to the tablet, have never discovered. Researchers translating this passage pointed to the Mariana Trench, the deepest known point on Earth, a location less directly observed by humans than the surface of the moon, despite sitting on our own planet. The scribe describes this race monitoring, collecting, and extracting something from the ocean itself, though the exact Sumerian term is imprecise, leaving open whether the material taken is mineral, energetic, or biological in nature. The entry's final line has been singled out by multiple linguists as the most disturbing sentence on the entire tablet. They will leave the way one leaves a field that has been completely harvested. No timeline is given for when that harvest ends. What the tablet does confirm is that departure, when it comes, requires no permission from anyone on the surface. And 2 positions above this entry sits a race that is not extracting anything from Earth at all. It is simply waiting for something far smaller than resources to arrive first.
Topic number 3. Nibiru. No star is named for the second entry, because according to the scribe, this race was never traveling from one. Its origin is described only as the second of the wandering bodies counted outward from our world, language ancient astronomy used for planets, and one several researchers have connected to the long-disputed claim of an undiscovered body, sometimes called Nibiru, positioned somewhere within our own solar system, rather than light years beyond it. The tablet states this race is already positioned, already present, already close. What separates this entry from every one ranked below it is the trigger the scribe specifies for action, not the moment humans detect them by accident, the moment humanity, as a species, accepts that it is not alone in any collective, undeniable sense. That is not a technological threshold, it is a psychological one, and the tablet gives no method for measuring when it has actually been crossed. Once it is, the scribe states this race descends, without specifying whether the descent is peaceful or hostile. He does not need to. Second position on a 12-entry threat ranking already answers that question on its own. And the single entry ranked above this one required no acceptance, no discovery, and no trigger of any kind, because it was never arriving from anywhere to begin with.
Topic number 2. Anunnaki. Circled. A ring pressed directly into the clay around this entry, the only mark of its kind anywhere on the tablet, and translators agree it was not decorative. This classification carries no star, no constellation, no system, because the scribe states outright that this race never came from anywhere else. The Sumerian phrase used has been rendered multiple ways: the one who already lives here, the one who wears our skin, the one whose home this always was. Researchers linked the language to figures appearing throughout Sumerian tradition as the Anunnaki, beings described as having descended generations ago and never fully departed, embedding themselves instead into the structure of human civilization itself. Whichever translation is most precise, The implication holds. The highest-ranked threat on this entire document was never extraterrestrial in any conventional sense. It has watched every human empire rise and collapse from inside those empires, worn different names across different centuries and different cultures, and never once needed to leave, because it was never a visitor to begin with. The entry does not state what this race wants. The scribe either never knew or made a deliberate choice not to record it. A silence that unnerved every linguist working this fragment more than anything explicitly written on the rest of the tablet.
Nineveh. One line does not belong to any of the 12 numbered entries, added later in a different hand, in slightly different script, pressed into the lower edge of the tablet's second column. Translators agree almost universally on what it says. Not 12, 13. But the 13th does not know what it is. That single unnumbered sentence unraveled the entire document for the researchers who found it. Several argue the 13th entry refers to humanity itself, cataloged on its own threat assessment without ever realizing it belonged on the list, still unaware of what it actually is or what it might eventually become to something else. Above both columns, in smaller, more careful handwriting, the scribe left one final note. This is what we were told, not what he believed, not what he personally witnessed. What was transmitted to him and pressed into clay specifically so it would outlast him. It survived 4,000 years, buried in the ruins of Nineveh, pulled out by Austin Henry Layard in 1849, then locked in a museum basement under an unclassifiable label for over 170 years. A single unauthorized photograph brought it back into view in 2019, only for the object to vanish again within weeks, reclassified under a code the public cannot search. The translations, somehow, got out first, and they are still spreading.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.